had someone ask me on the Bible study, how do you know all of this stuff? And I didn't really have time to go into it with him, but I'll just share that story while I'm rolling my hair. So back in, gosh, I think it might have been 1997. No, it was 98 because we were in our first home. Anyway, I grew up in a church, but we didn't always go every weekend. We would go for a season. We would be there every weekend. And then there would be a season when we wouldn't be in there. And I lived in California. So I had friends that had all different kinds of backgrounds. It was a little melting pot. So because everybody was different culture, I found myself with friends that had different beliefs and went to different kinds of churches. And so I remember as a kid visiting many of the different churches. And I mean, we went to Baptist churches, and my family is African Methodist Episcopal. And our family church has been First AME under the pastoral tutelage of Chip Murray back in the day when Pastor Chip was pastor. Anyway, but I visited a lot of different churches. I visited all of them, it felt like. And because I had so many different types of exposure, and when I say all of them, I visited the Baptist, the Lutheran, the Methodist, the Catholic, the mosque, the Science of the Mind, the Jehovah's Witness, everybody's church we visited. And I had an aunt who was Jehovah's Witness, which that whole situation is a whole situation. But anyway, so I had a lot of exposure on a lot of different faiths. And I always wondered as a little girl, how come everybody's so different? Everywhere you go, somebody else worships something else, and there's different rules everywhere you go. This church doesn't let the girls wear pants, and this one doesn't let everybody play sports, and this one you gotta hold beads and shake them when you pray, and this one you gotta stand in a certain direction and when you pray, and this one you gotta be real quiet when you're inside, and this one is real loud. It was all these different, everything just. I was like, how come the Father is different in so many different ways? And I didn't call him the Father then, of course. But I'd always wonder, why? But the common thing was that everybody loved the Father. And they all, for the most part, called him the same name. For the most part. Now, as I got older, I realized that I'd be in church and I didn't understand nothing that they were saying. I didn't. Nothing ever made real sense. I had all these questions and I never remembered anything that they taught. The only message I ever remember Chip teaching was, give God your beeper number. Anyway, what a message. As if he don't know how to reach you. So anyway, I digress. So I remember when I moved to Atlanta, I had gone to a church. And in that church, I remember the pastor locked the doors and told us that the church had a goal of $5,000 more that they needed. And they were going to stay in there and lock the doors and pray until we prayed $5,000 out of our pockets. And at that point, I decided I wasn't going back to no church. And I'm glad I didn't stick with that. But so it was years that I was away from the church. Not the Father. I always trusted and believed the word. And I remembered as a little girl, my mother used to have us get on our knees at night and pray every night. And she still does to this day. I can't say the same, but I pray, but I don't. Anyway. So I remembered that I met this man, him and his wife. They were students of the word. They were Seventh-day Adventists. And he used to always tell me stuff. And he would teach, like he'd just be talking and just dropping scriptures and dropping stuff. And I asked him one day, I said, Wendell, how do you know all of the stuff that you know? And he would tell me how he knew, but I told him, you know what? I don't even want to know what you know. I want to know how you know what you know. I need you to teach me how to study. And so he came to my house and he brought this big old cart filled with all these books. And he had every Bible, every concordance, every Bible dictionary, the Torah, the Kamash. He had all of these books. And he pulled them out all on the table and he started showing me how to read, how to cross-reference, how to understand the context of the scriptures. He just helped me to build an understanding of how to utilize the tools that we've been afforded to understand and dissect and rightly divide the word. And so he had me, the very first thing he had me study, he said, let's look up some of these holidays. Let's pick one. And of course I picked Christmas, and man, the next thing I knew, I was giving away our Christmas tree. I gave our Christmas tree away and it was so pretty. But anyway, and that was, goodness, 1998. So I didn't stick with Wendell very long. It was just maybe he came over once or twice and we studied. And then after that, my body started falling apart. I got married, and I think that was probably not what I was supposed to do, and my body reacted to it, and everything started falling apart. I started having all kinds of crazy symptoms. I was in so much pain constantly. My neck and shoulders got up tight like this, and I couldn't turn my head to the left or right to drive. It got so tight that it literally pulled my spine out of alignment, caused 5 discs to rupture, 3 in my cervical spine, 2 in my lumbar. I started having so many crazy symptoms. My lips would blister, and then they would scab, and then I'd smile and they would crack, and there would be pus, and then they would heal again. And I just literally had scabs all over my lips. The bottom of my feet, if this was the bottom of my foot, it felt like I had a flame going under my foot. I had to hang my feet off the bed at night because I couldn't even have a sheet touch them. I couldn't have a hug. Everything hurt. You couldn't touch me. It was just awful. And it wasn't for a little while. It was for a long time, like over a decade. It was a long time. And during that time, that was when they told me I would never be a natural mom. And anyway, so while I was in the midst of all of that chaos going on in my body, of course, I started going to therapy because I was like, something ain't right. I remember my jaws locked up. I had gone somewhere to get a burger. Oh my gosh. And I opened my mouth and my mouth wouldn't open. I was trying to stuff the burger into my mouth. I was like, oh my gosh, I can't eat the burger. Oh, and that was when I had to draw the line. I was like, okay, we're talking to somebody. So I started therapy, and then I started healing a lot of the stuff that I didn't realize needed to be healed. And so by the time I had been in therapy for 2 years, my body was in full inflammation. It was in full-on pain, and I couldn't even, I was going to the emergency room. I had my boss take me to the ER because I just couldn't function. I was in so much pain. Excuse me. And I had gone to the ER probably 3 times in 1 month, and they didn't know what was going on. I had a whole team of doctors. They were trying to figure out what was wrong with me. This is back in the year 2000. So they put me on disability, and in October of that year, I remember walking into my bedroom. Me and my dog walked next to me, and my ex-husband was in the shower. And I heard this voice for the first time. I had never heard this voice. And the voice said, "Kelly, can you hear me?" And I thought, and I looked around and I realized my husband's in the shower. And if he said something, it was too close. That wasn't him. I looked down at the dog. I was like, that better not have been you. Oh my gosh. And then I said, okay, I'm just hearing things. Let me just let it go. And a few minutes later, I heard, "I know you can hear me. Kelly, can you hear me?" And I thought, oh my God, I just snapped. It's done. It's over. I'm nuts. I just snapped right now. It's over. And I fell out laughing on the bed. I was hysterical. I'm like, what next? My body is a mess. I'm in pain. I can't sleep. Everything hurts. My lips are all blistered. My feet are hot. And now I'm hearing things. I remember I went to my therapist the last time I saw her. And I told her, I said, I gotta tell you something. You're not gonna believe this. I said, somebody's talking to me and he won't shut up. Her eyes got big. I said, I'm thinking what you're thinking. Oh my goodness. So that happened. That was October in the year 2000. So a month later, for Thanksgiving, my ex-husband told me he did not want me to talk to him the whole weekend. And he said he wanted a silent weekend. And imagine my shock. And I was livid. How dare you? So you want me to cook dinner all day, Thursday, clean it up, serve you, and do it in silence so you can watch the game all weekend and not be bothered? And immediately the Holy Spirit gave me peace and told me to tell him this. He said, tell him that you're going to write everything down, every joke, every idea, everything that comes up, you're going to write it down. And then on Monday, you're going to let him have it. And so I told him that, and he agreed. And so it was like, okay, fine, let me get my notepad, because we writing today. So I went and got my notepad, and now keep in mind, I had a belt on, which I still wear my belt around my back. But I had a belt on with an ice pack in the back. I had an ice pack around my neck. I had on hospital shoes because I could no longer wear high heels. And I don't know if I shared this with y'all, but I used to model. I started modeling when I was 11, and I modeled for 11 years. I was one of the first black models for Nordstrom. And I was one of those mannequins that you would be walking through the mall and you'd see the girls in the store all dressed up and you would think they were mannequins until we changed positions. And you'd be like, wait a second, did she just move? That was me. Anyway, so I used to wear heels all the time. But by this point in my life, I couldn't wear heels and I was wearing hospital shoes all the time. So, excuse me. So, where was I? So anyway, I'm schlepping around in the kitchen, cooking Thanksgiving dinner, and I'm writing. And I have all this stuff going on, and I'm writing. And I wrote all day Thursday, all day Friday, and all day Saturday. And by dusk on Saturday, I started to read what I had written. And as I read, I found myself sitting on the floor next to the couch, and I was just rocking and rocking. And I just couldn't believe what I had written. I couldn't believe that I had stopped writing a long time ago, and the Father had taken over my pen, and he was writing through me, to me, and he was telling me that he had taken me down these different paths in my life so that I would get this nugget, so that when I met this person, I'd be able to deliver that message, and then they would open the door to something else. And he was just showing me how he had put all these different pieces together in my life. And oh my God, I just sat and I wept, and I wept. I don't have enough. And I just cried. And he also told me that, he told me that I was to keep writing, to trust him, and whatever he told me to do it. And that through my obedience, it was going to open me up to another level of intimacy with him, and then give me the ability to teach that very same thing to women, so that we all could learn how to have a new, deeper level of intimacy with the Father, and that he would heal my body, and that this would become a movement, and that it would change lives. And when he told me that, I'm like, I can't even take a flight of stairs. How am I going to do any of this stuff? What am I going to, I'm in pain all the time. And it just, it shocked me. It scared me. I wept. And I did what he said. I continued to write. I continued to trust him. And he continued to reveal to me. And then eventually, it wasn't a little bit of time, y'all. It took, that was in the year 2000, and we're in 2025. So after that, hold the phone. I have to find some rollers. Be right back. Okay, so I continued to write, and it took me 11 years, but I finished my first book. And that book, I didn't ever set out to be an author. I didn't know I could do it, honestly. I never even considered it. But he had me document my experiences with him, and that's how my first book came to be. And in it, he was teaching me how to love me, because I had forgotten. Oh, that was sweet. So I continued to write, and he healed me, and I was able to get pregnant and have my 2 miracles in my mid-40s. But to answer the first question, he was asking me, how do I know all this stuff? So in the year 2000, after I had those 2 spiritual experiences that blew my hair back and that opened me up to this journey, because I was in so much pain, I was hungry. I mean, when I tell you I was hungry, I was going to not be hurting. And when I tell you I was hurting, I mean, everything hurt all the time. It was relentless. It was in my sleep. It was hard to sleep. I couldn't get any relief. At one point, my doctors had prescribed me 3 massages a week, every week for 12 weeks. And then they gave me another bout of them. And then they gave me another bout of them. I had knots were so big around my shoulder blades. They would dig in there with a tool, and I would scream, and they would turn music up loud in the office so that they could do the work. It was that bad. And the medicine, oh my gosh, they were giving me all of the stuff that they are afraid to give people now. They were giving it to me in wheelbarrows. Anything I wanted. Hydro, oxy, whatever the thing was, they gave it to me. And I took it. And it was just by the grace of the Father that I never had any kind of addiction. I never had to have any kind of withdrawals. That's a whole nother conversation we can have at another time. We're back in the bondage, y'all. So, anyway, I guess I'll take my next one. So, I was desperate. I was desperate to be out of pain, and I was scouring the Word the entire time. You promised me this. Show me, show me, show me. And I used what I learned from Wendell, the guy who was the Seventh-day Adventist. I used what I learned from him. And then I had a friend who, hold on one second. I had a friend who went to this church. And one day she came over with a box set of VHS tapes on their healing conference because she knew that I was in pain and I was trying to heal. So she brought me this box set from her pastor. And at the time I was like, oh no, I don't need nothing from no pastor. No, thank you. But I was so desperate and I was so hungry that I was like, oh no, we're gonna watch these. We're gonna see what he got to say, because if he could help me, I'm willing to hear it. And so what I did was I started listening to those tapes. But what was crazy is as I listened to those tapes, the things that pastor was saying were exactly word for word some of the things that the Father had said to me in my writing on that silent weekend of Thanksgiving. Word for word. It was so much that I would go back and look at my notes and be like, whoa, wait a minute. He said exactly what he said to me. Like, word for word. How did he know that? And I didn't know the Father could do that either. And so, because that started happening, I was listening to all of the tapes. So I went through that entire box set, just trying to figure out, honestly, it was because I wanted to see if it was going to happen again. It was weird. Like, I didn't know the Father could talk to you, number one. And then I certainly didn't know he could tell somebody else what he told me. And then those tapes had been recorded. I don't know when they were recorded, but anyway, he kept saying it. Every single tape I put in, that pastor knew what the Father had said to me in my writings. And it was so much that I was like, okay, now I got to see this man on TV and see if it happens again. And it did. And it kept happening. Every single time I heard that pastor, he would say something else that the Father had already said to me in my writing. And so much so that I kept my notebook with me while I was listening to him, because I wanted to see if it was going to keep happening. And it kept happening. And so because at the time, my ex-husband was listening to what was on TV, he was hearing it too, and he didn't know what the Father had said to me, but the message was just resonating for him. And so we decided to visit the church. And when I went to the church, I was honestly going there to see if it would happen again. And it did. And it kept happening. And so we kept going back. And that began my graduate level study of the Word. And I was going to church. Oh, and I joined the choir. And so I was in choir rehearsal on Saturdays. I was in the choir stand at 6 a.m. on Sunday for 2, sometimes 3 services. And then I'd be in choir rehearsal on Tuesday nights. I'd be in Bible study on Wednesday nights. I'd be back in back at Bible study on Friday nights. And then choir rehearsal again on Saturday mornings. And this was a deep dive. This pastor, if I called his name, you'd know it. But this pastor would give us 20 scriptures easy per sitting. So he had us digging in the Word, cross-referencing. He had us understanding the context, the history, the etymology. We were understanding the Word, and I was there so much, and I was in the choir. So one of the requirements in choir was before you could even begin to practice with the choir body, you had to pray in the Spirit for 30 minutes. 30 minutes. So by the time you are done praying in the Spirit, you are like on a whole nother level. Just the breath alone took your consciousness to another level. And then when you sing, it's just a whole nother experience. So I was submerged in that on Sundays, 3 services, Wednesdays, Tuesday nights, Wednesdays, Friday, and then Saturday again. I was like in it for some years. and I loved it. And I became a part of the prayer team. When you would call the church, you would pray. I was praying with you. I helped to build the Bible school from the ground up. I was the IT director. It was so much. And I loved every minute of it. But just being exposed to that level of depth of word every week, and I was there for 25 years. Well, I left in 2021, so I was there for 21 years. So that is the foundation that I have. And the Bible school was a 3-year commitment, and because I was the IT director, I was a part of every class, and I managed all of the recordings for every class. So I got exposed to the whole everything. And I trained all the ministers and all the students and the pastors. And I got to see a lot over those years, but it was also a very traumatizing time in my life. And it was just a lot. And my marriage fell apart in the best way. And I moved me and my girls, my 2 miracle girls, I moved us back home to California in 2021. And it got worse. A lot worse. And it wasn't until a couple of months ago that I finally came out of the trauma of it all. And that's a whole nother conversation, but gosh, I've been talking for 30 minutes. I came out of the trauma of it all, and last year, actually in the midst of the trauma of it all, last year the Father told me this revelation. Now, in the midst of all this, I had my miracle babies. Ooh, and I need to tell you guys about the supernatural childbirth miracle. I'll share that the next time. But I had my babies, and I watched the Father, and I've had so many miracle experiences that it's way too much. Anyway, enough of that. It's been quite a journey, and I learned how to study as I wrote my book. My book, The Self-Love Lessons, ended up being 730 pages. That's some foolishness. I took out 300 pages from my own book, and it ended up still being 408 pages. That's way too much book. But that's how much studying I had done. And I didn't stop. I have a hunger for the word. I want to know. And in all of that I did, and that's the first book. I wrote a second book too. But in all of that I did, I never, ever, 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 ever thought about his name not being correct. Not even a thought. I did have some questions about a lot of stuff in the Bible, because the more you study it, the more you see that there's some inconsistencies, or there's some questions. And you know, when you start asking questions and people don't have answers, they make you feel condemned for having questions. But I always had questions. I questioned the Dead Sea Scrolls from the first time I heard about them, and I couldn't understand. I remember saying to some people at the church, have y'all heard about this? Y'all read them yet? And they were like, listen, if you wanted me to know, you'd have put it in a book. I don't need to know about none of that. It's not in the book. And I thought, why? Why don't you need to know? Those people, they put that stuff in those clay jars and drug them up the mountain and hid them in caves. They had a reason to do that. They just wouldn't have done that 2,000 years ago. There had to be a reason. There has to be something inside those books. But we were programmed to not look. And so the church convinced me not to look either back then. But the Father kept tapping. He kept revealing to me that there was something more, and I'm grateful that I listened. So I'm gonna end it here, and it is now 12:30 at night. So I'm gonna shut it down. And thank y'all for listening. I hope that answers your question about what my story is. There's a whole lot more to it, but that's the high level. All right. Y'all be empowered. I'll see you in the morning. I'll be dropping the new Revelation readings tomorrow. I finished them up all the way. The book is done. So get ready. All right, y'all. Take good care. Leave me some comments. Like and subscribe, follow, do all the stuff, and I'll see you all in the next one.